This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.
Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, the good news is when the legislature lowers state income tax levels. The bad news is what the lawmakers have to do to compensate for the lost revenue, including a plan that is creating drama for the local movie industry, rather. There is more political drama ahead in anticipation of next year's New Orleans city elections, which will include electing a new mayor and possibly at least 3 new council members. We'll look at these stories as well as the archdiocese creating a public archive on abuse allegations, as well as further investigations of Mayor Cantrell's former bodyguard. We'll also look at the Audubon Institute's latest plans for riverfront development. And joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Stephanie Riegel, staff writer, The Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, LeBron Joseph, news anchor and reporter, WGNO-TV, Channel 26, and Mike Pearlstein, investigative reporter, WWL Louisiana, Channel 4. Go on over to LeBron because action up in Baton Rouge. What are they doing today?
Up in Baton Rouge. Well, today was a pretty quiet day, but yesterday, 2 things happened. House Bill 9 doesn't pass, and that's the one that sort of deals with all of the additional revenue from this HB 1 and 2 that have passed. One dealing with the personal income tax, the other one dealing with the corporate tax, but trying to make up that 1.8 billion or whatever that is in revenue.
For somebody who doesn't know, the legislature's in special session right now to redo our tax structure.
Yes, we have
20
heard,
days.
We've heard a generation or two of lawmakers going to Baton Rouge saying, hey, we got the worst taxes. We tax corporations too much, so why we don't get the business that Texas and Florida and all these other states get. And we are taxing our citizens too much and all. We've got to do this a better way. And the better way, according to Governor Jeff Landry and the supermajority in Baton Rouge, Governor Landry's plan is to cut the tax rate for both individuals and corporations, however, raising that revenue by a couple of other measures. One, by taxing services, which is sort of that was the road bump yesterday. And the types of services, over 47 different services. If you've watched any of the hearings this week, some of them are a bit comical. I think Mandy Landry from New Orleans said a line the other day, something to the effect that, hey, I'm confused by what you're saying we tax, and I think you're confused as well, because all of these services, and as you and I were talking earlier, there are sort of subset services of some of the services.
What are some of them?
Quilting, delivery, shipping, freight, transportation services associated. I was very serious about the quilting embroidery service, which I thought we were actually paying taxes on some of these things like transportation and all that as well. The quilting thing, how much are we going to raise with quilting services, and who are we taxing? And that is also the issue that many lawmakers have, saying that, okay, we're going from what is this tax that is actually working, we're able to balance a budget, to now not knowing whether we, first of all, make up this shortfall of this, $1.5 billion or whatever, and we don't have a guarantee that taxing these services is going to make up the shortfall.
Because the flat tax, the personal flat tax of 3%, that has passed the House, right?
Well, that has passed the House. The Senate has not considered anything yet. They begin considering things on Sunday, the committees and all. But everything that has gone through the House has passed, with the exception of HB 9 yesterday, and that is the one on the services. And there's pushback from both sides of the aisle. Some of the services are, boat storage and things of that nature. As a boater, I understand that, it costs money, and if I've got a storage, I'm going to have to pay for that. But again, many residents feel as we already pay taxes on some of this. Are we not paying state taxes on any of this stuff? The personal upkeep, software, things of that nature. If you download something, there were so many different tentacles in the spider of the hearings this week asking, and even I think one that got a lot of folks' attention is the word that our insurance rates would probably go up. Now, who can afford that when, in fact, we're in an insurance crisis because of some of the things we would have to pay for that we currently don't through our insurance policies, if
Yes,
you will.
nobody wants to hear that.
I'm
That's
sorry.
true.
One of the things that I heard yesterday talking to some folks up there was that it's just like lawmakers feel like things are moving so fast.
That is
and while
correct.
they may have liked this concept in theory,
Yes.
it's something, as you said, we've needed to address a long time, but when you get into the details, it's just way too hairy, way too nuanced,
Yeah.
and moving too fast.
Right. Devil's in the details all the time, and that, I think, is why we're getting some pushback and that there is word of a deal on the movie industry tax credits and on the historic tax credits, because the sizes of both of those businesses and those industries here in the state, in the movie business 20 years ago, okay, it's a small group of people, it's this, it's that. We've got studios, we've got infrastructure, we've got, thousands of jobs across the region. Do we really want to cut the legs from under there? And the other problem with this whole dropping the tax credits on the movie industry thing is the fact that that's even out there. The folks in the industry are saying, hang on a second, we have the mere fact that we're talking about doing this already puts us at a disadvantage with all of these other markets, these 44 markets that instituted tax credits after us.
Very competitive, and also,
Yes.
the publications, the industry, the entertainment industry,
that are already
publications
writing about
are
it.
reporting this.
Yes, exactly.
What about lobbying pushback?
The lobbying pushback, there has been lobbying pushback from the movie industry. There's been lobbying pushback from the historic tax credits. We're a very old state with very old buildings, with very old structures. Who wants to really do away with that when, in fact, this is promising industry that that has turned real profits, that has employed people. I tend to believe as the week has progressed, we've seen the pushback happen, Mike, but we've also seen lawmakers sort of come around to say, well, hang on a second. And I think the way I heard it coined this week was that there would be a reduction on the tax credits for both the historic tax credit and the movie industry, a cap which would go down and then be studied for the next year or two. And so that kind of
Kicks the can down the road.
yes, it does. But it also doesn't make up the revenue that we need for the other side
But
of this.
there seems to be general agreement over the fact that our tax structure does need to be taken care of, needs to be changed in some sort of way. And that's the overall effort here, is to get that done. E, was there something that you wanted to ask? I thought that was. Okay, all right. Thanks a lot, LeBron. Now we're going to move on over to Steph, because the Archdiocese of New Orleans has said that it will create an archive, which would include what?
Well, this is part of the non-monetary settlement in the bankruptcy case. They're still fighting over how much money to pay survivors as compensation for past abuse. But it was a pretty significant announcement about 10 days ago when the Archdiocese and the committee that represents these 500 or so abuse survivors came out with a plan that they jointly agreed to had like 35 pages worth of provisions of non-monetary settlements, one of the most significant of which is to create a public archive that will include all of the allegations and cases of abuse that occurred in this diocese going back to however. There have been credible claims made against some 330 priests, deacons, nuns, other archdiocese employees or whatever over the years. So presumably this archive would include information about all of those claims, at the very least, the names, the dates, where it occurred.
So names
and the names of the abuser, not the names of the survivor, unless they agree, want it public. And it might even include more than that. It's not entirely clear how much ancillary information about a particular abuse claim the diocese might provide. But we know that it appears to be pretty robust compared to what other dioceses have put forward as their settlements. And also, given the fact that the Survivors Committee is behind this, tells you that it addresses a lot of the concerns and demands that the survivors have made. Other provisions in the document, Archbishop Amen has agreed to meet with survivors individually and also in groups. There will be like 10 different meetings set up around the diocese in what they call the deaneries, which is groups of different parishes, and that'll be an opportunity for survivors to come forward and yell and scream at him and tell him about, their hardship over the years, and he'll have to listen and apologize. He's also agreed to write letters of apology individually and in globo, all sorts of other child protection measures that we thought the diocese already had in place, but these say are even stricter, and they pledge greater accountability and transparency.
So monetary settlement.
Monetary settlement. Discussions are still ongoing. We have a mediator. We had an expert report that came out a few weeks ago. He said, he found fault across the board. He said everybody can do a better job and should. And since then, talks have continued. There's going to be a key hearing coming up next week on Thursday. It's going to be the first time everybody has been in open court since that expert report came out and since the non-monetaries came out. And so it's going to be interesting to see what comes of that. There's still a couple of big motions hanging out there that the judge has not ruled on. One of them was filed by a group of attorneys who represent some, but not all, of the abuse survivors. They're asking the judge to remove Archbishop Amon from his position of oversight of the case and appoint an independent trustee to represent the interests of the debtor, that being the archdiocese. I don't.
So,
she may or may not rule on that.
Right. Okay.
This week.
Another thing happened this week, and that is a significant birthday for the Archbishop.
That's right. He turned 75 on Tuesday, which is the mandatory retirement age, or mandatory age by which a bishop must submit his resignation. And so Archbishop Amon did that. He submitted it to the papal nuncio in Washington, who will forward it to the Vatican. However, he offered to stay on. And based on what has happened in other dioceses, they will probably let him, because that has been the trend. There are lots of bishops around the country reaching retirement age for a variety of reasons, and typically the Vatican lets them stay on and serve. And it would be hard to put a new person in charge of this bankruptcy after literally more than 4.5 years.
Yeah.
And Amon has said he wants to see this through.
Okay. All righty, Steph. Thanks a lot. Okay, Mike, let's move on over to you, because another report came out, Public Integrity Bureau of the NOPD, regarding Jeffrey Vappy.
Yes, you could call it a Public Integrity Bureau report, but this was actually outsourced to an outside law firm, Transcendent Law Group, because the Public Integrity Bureau of the Police Department had to recuse itself because of its own previous internal investigation of Officer Vappy, then Officer Vappy, and that was the source of considerable controversy when it was exposed that they did not have a aggressive, full-throated investigation. In fact, pulled their punches, didn't go after cell phone records and other things that would have corroborated many serious violations beyond what they did find, which was enough for 2 letters of reprimand. Now, those additional facts eventually were obtained by the FBI, and the federal government, the U.S. Attorney's Office, has indicted Officer Vappy, 8 counts, 7 of them for payroll fraud, wire fraud, and the other for lying to the FBI, claiming that this was not a romantic relationship with his protectee, Mayor Cantrell. So he has since retired while under investigation. But what happened was additional photographs surfaced of Vappy with the mayor at a couple different restaurants, dining and drinking alcohol. And this additional investigation, in which the Metropolitan Crime Commission, the nonprofit watchdog group, lodged complaints, and because the PIB not only botched the first investigation, but they were reprimanded by the federal judge overseeing the consent decree, the independent monitors. There was a very lengthy report, and the PIB and police department admitted we have to do a better job, make some reforms there. But they weren't about to let them do Vappy 2.0. And the outside law firm did a pretty thorough job and uncovered yet more details, more violations, 13 total in 2 incidents, one in 2022 at a restaurant called Doris Metropolitan, and the other one 2024 at the Tableau restaurant on April 7th. and that was Ann Bro, who took a picture from her balcony on the Pontaba, literally feet away, and that went to the Metropolitan Crime Commission. And anyway, that became the subject of this second, PIB outsourced look at
And
at
it is a violation of NOPD regs, right, to be drinking on the
Okay,
job,
so
to consume alcohol
the
while on duty.
violations run from drinking on the job, which was the case verified in both of those instances, which are about 2 years apart. One 2022, one 2024. For example, at the Tableau, they got the whole restaurant tab that starts with mimosas, little escargot appetizer, into the main course with a bottle of Pinot Noir wine over the stretch of more than 3 hours, sitting there with video. The reports included some security camera still shots of them. And you could see in one of them clearly when Vappy takes his jacket off, he's wearing a gun, he's drinking and consuming the alcohol, all violations of NOPD policy. And he wasn't even properly doing his job, according to these reports, of protecting the mayor. His back's to the door. At one point, he gets up and leaves her alone, which is the whole purpose of having a protective
And
detail.
he was on duty at that point.
On duty, and that was yet another violation. So in professionalism, neglect of duty, drinking on the job, unauthorized use of his firearm, it racked up to 13 additional violations. Now, it's a moot point in a sense that he, after getting indicted, he retired from the police department and continued to deny any romantic relationship. Another element of, it's not like you can discipline him and give him, any days of suspension. A letter of reprimand doesn't do any good. It does stay in his employment file for if he were to seek any future law enforcement jobs. He's pretty much almost instantly disqualified from ever being in law enforcement. What was sort of the scintillating additional facts were, for example, the report on the Tableau, April 7th, 2024, indicates that the report sort of insinuated, it set up a timeline where this was almost a celebration of Vappy's divorce papers being filed. And initially, the divorce papers from his ex-wife alleged number of sexual encounters with the mayor that he admitted to. He later, denied that, and then they filed an additional proceeding in the divorce lawsuit, which was kind of a no-fault divorce. Around that same time, April 7th, it actually had a date of April 8th, and April 7th, they're sitting there drinking and eating, or Vappy and the mayor sitting eating and drinking.
Then real quick, I want you to touch on the travel, too.
Oh, yeah. Well, so
regarding the report.
Going back to an earlier thing that was uncovered, and it was not a violation, but it went ahead and mentioned the timeline in which the mayor was set to travel to Singapore for some sort of conference. She was getting a lot of heat because she had been traveling, and that was the time of the first class travel, which was not authorized. And sure enough, this outside law firm uncovered that Vappy was supposed to be accompanying the mayor to Singapore, and yet only one hotel room was booked in Singapore, raising all kinds of other questions, fill in the blanks. That's what the report kind of leads to, go ahead and presume what these facts mean.
We need to wrap this up. This report, does it have any bearing on the indictment?
It doesn't help him in the sense that more facts, and we presume they're known by the FBI, but his posture of, I know he's pleaded not guilty, but the posture of innocence just gets a little more difficult with these new findings.
All right. Interesting, Mike. Thanks a lot. All right, E, over to you. And still talking about the city of New Orleans and elections that are going to be coming up in a year for a new mayor.
Yeah, 225 next year will be the regularly scheduled mayoral election. Mayor Cantrell is term limited, so we will be electing a new mayor one way or the other. The primary will be in October. Last week, people who are thinking about running for office have to file a disclosure form with the state ethics office. And last week, I guess it was a Picayune that discovered, they looked at Helena Moreno's form, and the question they asked, what office do you intend to run for? And she said, Mayor, City of New Orleans. So this is the first time it was like written down. Somebody said, hey, I'm running for mayor.
Running for mayor, yeah.
Even though she filed it in August, okay? And so all of a sudden it became big news, especially with the presidential race out of the way. She hasn't formally announced yet, but she's not denying that she's running. I mean, she is campaigning. And so that opened speculation, well, who else is going to run for mayor? People have talked about it, but not officially acknowledged it, are Oliver Thomas, council member who at one time was council member at large and who at one time in another world was considered to be a mayoral candidate, and Royce Duplessis, who's a state legislator, a younger state legislator. Also, a lot of you were asking about, what about Building Nooneyman Baptiste?
Yeah.
He's the guy who organized the campaign, the
Recall.
campaign.
yeah, and he's saying he's thinking about it too. So anyway,
Man's back in the race.
yeah, some people are
Although, look for Nooneyman to maybe run for some other position
could be.
because there are a bunch of council seats open.
Right. Including Joe Geruso's.
not
Joe Geruso
running.
announced
Okay,
that he's not
like
seeking
a year ago, if you look at this election, people are saying, well, Moreno's going to run for sure.
Yeah.
So will J.P. Morrell, the other at-large candidate. But he said no. I mean, he just pulled out. He says he's got 2 daughters going to college, got to pay for their tuition.
And
a lot
Helena
of
Moreno and J.P. Morrell are close political allies. It was always the wisdom that if one ran, the other would not. And Helena's obviously indicated and starting to build a campaign team that J.P. Morrell certainly is not going up against her.
Yeah, and so that's exactly what happened. I mean, he's pretty adamant. So with Moreno running for mayor, that's going to vacate one of the at-large seats. Okay, so Morrell will keep his, and so that's one to be filled. There is, and this is very unusual, I don't know about this in politics at all, there's kind of an understanding that when you have an office where there's 2 people, and traditionally it's one is held by a white person, the other is held by a black person, that you maintain that. And the political structure is pretty much, there's no law, there's no judge, there's nobody, and there's no policeman says you got to do that. But there just has been an understanding in the political structure, and it's pretty much worked out that way.
Represents the diversity of the city too. You know? I think it's been
And what upset that dynamic was Joe Geruso indicating that he would not run. He was term limited for his District A.
Who I believe would have been the leader.
That's right. He would have been a front runner announcing for at large, but he's not
that's what I'm
continuing.
saying. Yeah, I think a lot of people say, well, yeah, the other person's going to be Joe Geruso, who's got a lot of experience. And that'd be pretty powerful to have J.P. Morrell and Joe Geruso. Then out of the blue, Geruso announced this week that he's not going to run. He's going to finish out his term, has a big job with a law firm, and prefers to be doing that, I guess. And so that opens up wide open. So we'll be electing a new council member at large who may or may not be black or white, okay?
So I mean, we need to wrap this up. So just sort of the discussion about Orleans Parish politics, that gets kicked off.
But let me mention kind of a related thing. Also this week, Scott Walker, who's the at-large member in Jefferson Parish, announced that he's going to run for parish president in 2027 when Cynthia Shang's term limited. If Moreno wins, okay, she started her career as a reporter for Channel 6. Scott Walker started his career as a reporter for Channel 6. So you'll have the mayor of New Orleans and the parish president, okay, side by side, who'll begin their career. So if we know any other news anchors around there.
We'll be waiting for your announcement.
I'll be the president of my block around the corner.
All right. Thanks a lot.
ifs.
Stephanie, let's wrap up with you. Audubon Institute is seeking to oversee.
Yeah, negotiating with the city to take over control of the whole riverfront, not just Waldenburg Park, which they already manage, and the ongoing or about to start project to turn the riverfront wharves at Governor Nichols Street and Esplanade Avenue into another park, and Audubon has control over that. But they also are seeking to manage Crescent Park, which is controlled right now by the French Market Corporation, and the Moonwalk, which also is managed by the French Market Corporation. And at a meeting of the Audubon board earlier this week, Ron Foreman said they would need about $3 million. I think the city would very much like them to do it. It makes sense for a lot of reasons. Audubon would do a really good job. It would make sense rather than have an Audubon City along this 2.3 mile stretch of riverfront. It would put it all under Audubon's control. control, and they say they could do it more efficiently. They could also do it better. And then you would just have single providers for things like grass cutting and lighting and security.
The French Market Corporation oversees it right now.
The French Market Corporation right now oversees the Moonwalk on one side of the wharves and the Crescent Park on the other side of the wharves. And then Audubon has, so it's like Audubon, French Market, Audubon, French Market. It's like a checkerboard, which doesn't really make sense. The French Market Corporation is a public benefit corporation that manages certain properties for the city.
And their position on this?
Well, the French Market Corporation board has previously been negotiating with Foreman for Crescent Park. Now, I don't think they were looking to give up the Moonwalk, and it all comes down to money. But I mean, I think since they're kind of under the city, it would ultimately be the city's deal to make this happen. And I think Ron Foreman would like this to be part of his legacy. Of course, he retires at the end of this year, and he's often talked about, you know, wanting Audubon to sort of run this whole area of riverfront. There's not a whole lot they could do to the Moonwalk. There's a lot of programming I think they could bring to Crescent Park.
Yes.
It's really underutilized. It's beautiful. People love it.
And that's in Bywater, right?
That's in the Bywater on the downriver side of the wharves, which they're going to start construction on probably in early 2025.
Okay, we'll see how that goes. Thanks a lot. All right, guys, other stories. Over to you.
A year from today, November 15, 2005, will be the date of the runoff in the mayoral election. So a year from today, it'll be a Saturday, but we'll know who will win. Okay, that same date, November 15th, a year from today, every year, is LeBron's birthday. Okay, so there'll be two things to celebrate. There'll be two things to celebrate: the new mayor and LeBron being a year older.
Being a year older. Thank you, Errol.
All right, Steph, over to you.
Well, controversies brewing, speaking of the Bywater, over plans to build a new hotel right next to the Rusty Rainbow Bridge, and that's up in the city council coming up this week. So
Okay, all right. LeBron, over to you.
Just one of our newer cool festivals this weekend, and one of my favorites, Beignet Fest, tomorrow in City Park at the festival grounds. So I'll be out there. Come get a beignet, Errol.
All right, Mike.
Well, one of the questions I am getting frequently is if and when the mayor is going to be indicted in all of these cases. We know about Vappy and his indictment, and the contractor, Randy Farrell, accused of bribing the mayor. And I don't have the answer to either of those, when or if. However, I can tell you that the timeline for the feds to act is much longer than people presumed. They kind of have given themselves until, believe it or not, 2028 in the Randy Farrell conspiracy. That's when they say his ill-gotten gains continued through 2023. 5-year statute of limitations stretches it to 2028. And on top of that, it doesn't look like it's going to be imminent because they impaneled a new grand jury. New grand juries always have to get up to speed. That takes a while. Then we're in the holidays. So I would say it looks like we're not getting action until at least next year.
All right,
Mayors
guys.
out of office or about to be out of office.
Well, this will be a year and ticking, so they could very well go all the way until she's out of office, like they did with Ray Nagin.
All right, we got to stop talking now. Thanks a lot for being here. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.